We are back live for episode 8 of KSP 101. Welcome back, everyone. It's time to resume our mission. We rendezvoused, docked, and transferred. You can see. We're ready to finish off the rest of the missions and contracts here in the local Kerbin system by disengaging the dock and landing on Minmus as per contract. We have a few more contracts here to finish up, so let's go ahead and begin. What we will do now is make sure that we disengage our SAS and re-engage it so we are not locked onto any type of marker. We are just standard stability and assist. And let's go ahead and figure out which one of these docking ports we need to use to undock, and then go ahead and undock. And make sure that we are using the proper vessel, which will have our scientist and engineer with our pilot. And once we are disengaged from the dock, we will go ahead and turn our RCS on, making sure that we are in docking mode, and then pull away from the other vessel just a little bit, and then disengage the RCS, go back to staging mode, and then lock ourselves into retrograde. Make sure that our engine is on and that our thrust limiter is back at its full limit. And once we are a decent amount away from the vessel, we will begin to retroburn, but we will not do that until we are starting to move over to the day side. But we also want to pick a good spot to land, and I believe we are going to try to land right over here, where we will be at quote-unquote sea level. That way we know that we are going to be landing right at 0 meters on the surface of Minmus. It's the easiest place to land. We are pretty much right in line to land there as well. So let's go ahead and warp just a little behind where we're wanting to land over there, which should be about here. And we'll switch our view, make sure that we're moving away from the other vessel. Sometimes the game can cracken out and make you slam right back into the vessel for some reason, but luckily we don't have that problem. Alright, so let's finish this time warp and enjoy the view as we wrap around. We can see Kerbin and the Mun over there. And here we are arriving on this side of Minmus, where we are moving to the day side. Let's go ahead and set ourselves to surface, and then reorient our vessel to where our solar panels are again top and bottom side. And then we will go ahead and begin our retro burn once we switch to the map view, and we will be keeping an eye both on the apoapsis and periapsis as we do this. Want to make sure to do this just a little ahead of where we're going to try to land, and then begin our retro burn. And once we see that start to touch down a little ahead of where we're trying to land, we'll reduce that just a little bit more, and we will end up landing somewhere here in between the vessel and our point of contact. Now, Minmus does not have a whole lot of gravity, so you don't really want to reduce your thrust too much, or else it's going to take forever to get down to the surface. Now let's go ahead and, before we do anything else, just in case anything happens, and then time warp ourselves down closer to the surface. It should automatically cut us off at about 500 meters or 5,000 meters, but we're going to stop a little sooner so we can make sure to keep an eye on our speed. Let's go on ahead and engage our landing legs, which you can do by either taking the mouse cursor and selecting the toggle action group landing gear, or with the mouse disengaged you can hold the left shoulder button and hit square on the PS4, or I believe X on the Xbox controller. And once that's engaged, we will go ahead and time warp down just a little bit further, maybe at about 5,000 meters or so. And we'll cut that off. And once we hit, okay, so it's not going to automatically cut us off at 5,000 meters, so make sure that you do that yourself. We will reduce our surface speed down to about 50 meters per second. Once we hit 50 meters per second, we will disengage the throttle. Let's go ahead and turn our RCS on from there. and highlight our resources menu so we can keep an eye on how much fuel we have as well as how much fuel we have for our monopropellant. Now we can see our shadow coming up behind us, and we're going to land with our command pod facing towards the sunny side. That way we can see what we're doing. And once we get closer to the surface at about maybe 1100 or 1000 meters, we will reduce our surface speed relative down to about maybe 20 meters per second. It's even better just to do what's called a suicide burn, which is as soon as you're close to the surface and you know that you can slow down to the proper speed, you activate full throttle and cut it off right before you land. But I like to be a little more careful. Looks like we might have our green sandstone sitting over there waiting for us to pick up. As we approach the surface, we're going to slow ourselves down to about 10 meters per second now. And we'll cut the engine off and then crank it back up to where it's just barely moving it down. And once we get real close to the surface, we'll decrease that down as close to about 3 meters as possible, cut it off, and then reduce it towards barely slowing down, disengage the SAS, re-engage it, and then we land. Now, by disengaging the SAS and re-engaging it, we won't flip our vessel over as it tries to stay retrograde. Sometimes if you don't do that, upon landing the retrograde will flip topside back towards space and your vessel will flip around. Now after landing, let's disengage our RCS and our SAS and turn our brakes on by hitting square or X on the controller. And we have landed. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin our missions by first collecting a crew report. And then let's get the rest of our science. Let's get our barometric pressure reading. Go over to this side and collect our temperature reading, and then we will grab a mystery goo observation. And after doing that, we will begin by EVAing our engineer. Let's turn those lights on. And first things first, let's grab an EVA report. And then we will grab a surface sample. And then let's take the science from the barometer, the thermometer, as well as the mystery goo. We won't worry about resetting that since we have another one and we're probably not going to use either. Let's make sure to take both those crew reports, the one that we got from the space around Minmus and from the surface, and then we'll store all that science back in the command pod and highlight our cargo over here and grab our control module, highlight our Kerbin, stick it in Bill's inventory, and let's drop off of the command pod and activate our RCS, make a nice smooth landing, and we'll be facing the north side. And after we land, let's go ahead and place that command module, or control module, sorry. After we have deployed that, let's move on back over to our vessel. And again, the gravity on Minmus is almost non-existent. There's barely any gravity at all, so it's much easier just to use your RCS. Let's go as close to the vessel as possible and see if we can then grab some more of this stuff. Okay, we cannot, so let's go ahead and boost up a little bit. And then grab the photovoltaic panel with our engineer. We want to make sure to deploy the science with the scientist this time and make sure not to hit our solar panel because we're going to need that. Let's grab that photovoltaic panel, stick it in our inventory, and go back over here and place that around our experiment control module. Here should be a good spot, so let's go ahead and place that. And for now, I believe that's all we need from our engineer, so let's swap back to the vessel by holding L1 or the left shoulder button and using the D-pad left or right to swap over. And we will break out our scientists. And since we're here, we might as well just go ahead and restore that mystery goo. And then we will hop off the vessel after making sure to grab the GUEB monitor, placing it in our scientist's inventory, activate our RCS, and move on over here. We'll place this on the other side of the control module at about here. Should be good. So let's go ahead and place that. And that's really all that we can do in this location. Let's go ahead and highlight all these and make sure that they are working properly. Okay, so they have a connection, which is good. They are all powered because we placed this with a level 2 engineer, and it is now producing 3 units of power, which is more than enough. So everything's good on this end. Let's also check that science. Now, we are getting a much higher rate of science now because we deployed that science module with a scientist, which is very good. Now let's swap back over to our vessel and get Jebediah out of that command pod so we can finish another part of the contract, which is placing the flag, which we will do right over here facing the north side, a little away from those modules. Let's see, right here should be good. Let's make sure we're facing north. Highlight Jebediah, move down here, and plant that flag. And for anybody keeping track, this is flag number 3. Our first one was upon returning to Kerbin from orbit. Our second one was upon returning from landing on the Mun. And now, or on the Mun, and then now we have one on Minmus. Okay, so we have everything that we need to do in this location except one last thing. We need to locate that green sandstone, and I think I see one over there off in the distance. But let's zoom out and see if we can find one closer. Looks like there's one down here that we can grab that may be a bit closer than the other one, so let's make sure we know where that is. Let's see, where to go. Where'd you go, little stone? Keeping an eye out for that nice little shimmer. I'm not seeing it. Wonder where it went. Okay, let's zoom back in a little bit. There it is. Okay, let's zoom in on it. Okay, so that's at the opposite of 135 degrees. Let's zoom back in, and then we'll rotate ourselves to be facing at 315, and we will begin by activating our RCS thrusters and moving forward. And you can start to see it off in the distance. It's got a little bit of a shimmer to it. We'll just keep this speed, occasionally bumping that right trigger to move our prograde back up to the horizon mark so we continue to move forward at the same altitude. It's increasing our speed just a little bit to get there a little sooner. Just have to remember you have to be able to slow down all that speed once you get over here. Let's move ourselves over just a little bit and then line ourselves back up and then start to slow down while also boosting our altitude back up. And let's go ahead and land and grab ourselves a green sandstone. I suppose we picked a great location to find one after all. Alright, so once we land, we need to get close enough to where it says we can climb the rock. And then highlight Jeb and pick up a green sandstone. Very good. Now let's just go ahead and put that in our inventory. Now once again, you cannot transmit any stones that you pick up on the surface of another planetary or lunar body. You have to bring them back with you to get that science. Now let's make our way back to our vessel. Then we'll check out our fuel and see if we can't land in another biome, get some more science while we're here, and deploy our backup modules, our backup breaking ground modules. Let's go ahead and increase that to about 20 meters per second and make sure to boost up, again keeping ourselves level on our altitude. Once we get a little closer, let's go ahead and move our orientation to where we are going to be more in line with our vessel. Start to slow down a little bit. And then we'll start to turn ourselves so we can just grab the vessel and climb on in. Make sure not to hit the vessel too hard, or try not to hit it at all, or you might knock it over. Landing legs help, but the gravity on Minmus will make it to where it will knock over if you're not careful. Alright, let's board ourselves back up. Looks like we still have a good bit of fuel, plenty of Delta V. Swap on back over to our other Kerbals and get them back in the vessel. Forgot to turn on Bob's lighting there so we can admire the beauty of these breaking ground suits. Love that, especially how they're customizable. Alright, let's grab our vessel, get back in here, and swap on over to Bill. Activate our SAS and our RCS and get him back in the ship. Now we just need to find somewhere else to land and do some more science and deploy some more modules. Looks like the closest place would be one of those hills over there. It's a little dangerous landing on the hills, so you have to be careful. You want to try to land on a nice level plane with no more than a 10 degree of inclination. We may just go ahead and do a 90-degree hop over here somewhere just to be safe and keep ourselves in line with the vessel that we need to redock with. But for now, let's go ahead and quick save just in case we fail and use too much of our fuel. Let's activate our SAS, and then we will take back off by throttling up nice and slow, disengaging our landing gear, and then pointing ourselves towards 90 degrees at a nice 90-degree angle, keeping on that 90 degree of inclination and locking. Let's just keep an eye on our trajectory. Let's increase our speed just a little bit. And again, we want this just ahead of where we want to land. I think we're going to try to land somewhere over here. So we're going to push that line out until our apoapsis is right above that. And once we're at about 11,000 meters, we're going to start our retro burn. That will also be where our vehicle is at its slowest point. Let's reorient the vessel a little bit here so both of our solar panels are in the lighting as much as possible. We want to make sure that our command module is also going to be facing towards the sunny side again, so we want it top side. Let's disengage our brakes by hitting square or X on the controller. Let's go ahead and time warp ahead to about 11,000 meters. And by the time we're at 11,000 meters, we should be right around here, like right above here, which is where we're going to try to land since it looks like a nice level surface. We might be a little off, so let's try to land about here. Once we're right over top of that area, we will disengage our warp. Let's make sure that we are set to surface. Make sure we're a little behind where we want to land. Let's go ahead and disengage our warp now. Reorient our vessel a little bit here. Activate our landing gear and begin to slow our vessel down a little bit. No more than 50 meters per second because we still want to continue descending at an angle. Let's go ahead and activate our time warp and see what we're looking at. Okay, we need to slow it down just a little more. Let's try about 25 meters per second. Activate our time warp again. Still too much. Okay, so let's bring it on down to about 15 meters per second. It's going to be a very slow landing, but a very accurate one, so we can make sure to land on a nice level surface. We should be okay now, so we'll just go on ahead and let that finish itself out until we're at about that distance from the surface. Now we can control our descent and make sure we have a nice smooth landing. Looks like we might have some new rocks that we can grab while we're here too. Quite a few too. Over there. Let's go ahead and start reducing our speed. This is a very slow suicide burn. As I mentioned in the last, we hit about 20 meters per second, we'll try to level out our throttle to where it's not increasing or decreasing much at all. We'd rather it be decreasing slowly than increasing though. Once we get real close to the surface, much like last time, we will start to decrease a little more rapidly until we hit about 5 meters per second, down to about 3 at the most. And we will cut our engines and let that reorient itself to where it's pointing right at the ground, controlling our descent speed, deactivate our SAS, reactivate it, turn on our RCS, and let's make our landing. Once we touch the surface, deactivate our engines, activate our brakes. Once we are done bouncing around a little bit here, we will deactivate the SAS. We don't want to tip over though, so make sure we don't. Looks like we're good. Let's deactivate our RCS and go ahead and quick save. That's on any other surface. This would be a pretty dangerous angle to be landing on, but we're fine here where there's not as much gravity. So now that we're here, let's go ahead and grab a crew report again and find out where we are. We are on the lowlands. So let's grab that, grab the rest of our science off of the command module, grab this mystery goo, the barometric reading. That barely took any delta V at all, which is good. But this will be the last biome that we're going to do in this episode for now. We're mostly doing it just so we can deploy these other breaking ground modules. So like last time, let's go ahead and quick save again just in case anything happens, and then get our engineer out. Let's activate that light. And let's grab this science. Move over here and grab the temperature reading. And then we'll grab all of the science out of this, including that crew report that we just got, and stuff everything back in. Now we can get another crew report. Now let's make sure there's nothing else in here. Everything in it should have already been deployed good, so let's highlight this one and grab the Probodyne experiment control station for our engineer to deploy. Then we'll come back for the photovoltaic panel. Upon dropping off, we will activate our SAS and our RCS, and just like last time, we'll move out of the way of the vessel, but let's try to find a more level plane. I guess we'll move down here a little further, just a wee bit further away. Want as level of a surface as possible to deploy these so we don't have too many issues with them. And it's looking like over here might be the ideal place to place these, where it levels out just a tad bit more. This should be good enough. It's not really a whole lot different of a degree of inclination, but it is leveling out just a tad bit more. Better than most of these other spots that we see around here, unless we want to go a little further. In fact, let's zoom out and try to check out some of these other rocks and see if they're any different than the green sandstone, and we may go ahead and move over to one of those locations instead, if they are. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other. There we go, there's one. Alright. That also looks like it might just be a green sandstone. Not 100% sure, we may have to bounce over there and check it out. So let's go ahead and do that. All those rocks look a lot larger than the one that we were just checking out at the other biome. So let's see what we have. Let's take ourselves just a minute to go over to one of these spots. Let's see what we're working with. So there's a smaller one over there. We're not going over there. I'm trying to find one of these larger ones. But that one seems to be closer to the vessel, so let's head over to it. Alright, we have a lot of speed built up that we're going to have to burn off once we get close. Now, this may or may not be one of the surface features that you can only interact with a rover, much like the trees on Kerbin. But we'll find out once we get here. See just how far we're moving away from that vessel, because we want to have enough monopropellant to make it back. So once you reach like half the fuel remaining on your jetpack, your pretty much at the point of no return, and you want to make sure to stop there, unless you want to hoof it the rest of the way back. I prefer not hoofing it back. It takes too long, usually. Alright, let's begin slowing down while keeping our altitude. Oh boy, we're going to pass over it just a little bit. And once we reduce that to 0 meters per second, we'll push it forward just a few, begin our descent. If I'm not mistaken, this is probably one of the ones that only a rover can interact with, but we'll find out. Okay, we are getting close. Let's land on this thing. It's a beautiful rock formation. Kind of wonder about all this green on it. It's very interesting. Okay, it's not looking like we can interact with it, so I'm guessing that this is probably just one of the ones that you can only interact with a rover. So let's just try to find somewhere flat and closer to our vessel. Looks like we might just want to head over here towards this area. So if you're not careful and you place these at too much of a slope, they'll like slide around and they won't stay where you place them, and that can be pretty dangerous because sometimes it can destroy the modules if they get crackened, much like a vessel. So it looks like over here will be okay though. It's not too much of a slope, and we don't want to be too far from the vessel because we're going to have to hoof it back to the vessel and then come back over here to bring our modules out and deploy them. Looks like another green sandstone over there we're passing by, but we need to reduce our speed, burning to the side as well. Looks like this will be an okay place, so let's try to land ourselves over here. Okay, now we're not moving forward much. Let's go ahead and control our descent. Now let's try to face, let's see, where's the sun? I believe, okay, so it's right over top of us, so let's just face, let's face the north side, and then we will deploy that Probodyne experiment control station here. And let's watch its placement. Okay, so it's not really sliding around or anything. Looks like we picked a good spot. Let's turn our RCS thrusters back on and head back over to our vessel over here. We can increase our speed to about 20 meters per second. Should be a good approach speed. Didn't take long to build up, so it shouldn't take. Down to about 10 meters per second while keeping our altitude. Actually, let's go ahead and reduce it even more, and then move ourselves around to this side of the vessel while making sure not to hit that solar panel. As soon as we're close enough, we will level out our hover, and then very quickly let's boost up a little bit higher so we have a little more time to grab this. Grab it, stick it in our inventory, and then let's head back over to our module, which is where to go. Okay, there it is. No, is that it? I believe that's it. Should be it. Let's head over there. Oh, we are almost out of monopropellant. We need to land while we can and try to head back over to our vessel now that we are out of monopropellant. That's not good. It's going to take us a minute to hoof it back over here. Let's try to jump forward if we can. Just deactivate our RCS and try to jump a little bit by hitting X. There we go. That's not helping much, is it? And we might hit the ground and fumble around a little bit. I hope we don't lose Bill by landing too harshly. Okay, very good. Alright. Well, lesson learned. We need to make sure to get back into our command pod so we can refill our monopropellant tanks for these thrusters. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to get back over here. We can maybe try to Nope, we're not in atmosphere, so time warping isn't going to help much. So let's just hoof it back over here. It'll ultimately save us more time instead of trying to hoof it over to our module site and then hoof it all the way back to deploy the photovoltaic panel. So we should be back over there here in just about a minute or so. Zoom out a little bit so we can get a nice view of our approach. Looks like it's about 70 meters away, so it shouldn't take more than about 70 more seconds at the most. Say each little hop is a meter. Say we should be down to about maybe 50 meters now. Now the only real issue is how are we going to get back up into the command pod? But as you saw a moment ago, we can jump pretty high, hopefully high enough to be able to jump up and grab that pod. If not, we might have some trouble. Let's go ahead and prepare to go to the other side of the vessel. It shouldn't be too much of an issue, but we'll find out. And even if it is, as long as you're close enough to the vessel, you can still try to grab it and climb up on top of it. Alright, now that we are here, let's move around to the front where this landing leg is. We can try to maybe climb the landing leg at the risk of pushing the vehicle over. Slowly enter ourselves over here. Let's quick save just in case something happens. And then point towards the vessel. Move towards it a little bit. Alright, let's jump and see just how high we can jump. Alright, so we can jump pretty high. Now we just want to make sure that we're going to jump right at the foot of the vessel. Oh no. Okay, come on. We don't want to jump up to where we're going to be making contact with the vessel per se. We just want to jump right in front of it. This is the lack of gravity. It can be a pain sometimes. Slowly turn our curving. Come on. Okay. That should be okay. Let's go ahead and jump and prepare to try to grab this thing if at all possible. Start mashing that square X button in preparation. And just keep jumping until we can make contact with the vessel. All the while hitting that square button in anticipation of being able to grab it and try to climb it. Okay, let's try to inch forward just a hair and jump again. Alright, we should be able to try to climb this vessel. If not, we'll give it one more landing that'll inch us forward just a hair. Oh, we are climbing. Very good. Alright, let's climb our way up here until we can grab the vessel. And then get back inside and refill our monopropellant and then EVA again. Now we're rolling. Okay, let's let go of the vessel naturally by climbing down, activate RCS and SAS, turn our light back on, and move our way back over here. So we can finally set that photovoltaic panel, get our scientist over here, so the scientist can set the mystery goo experiment. Go ahead and orient ourselves towards 90 degrees, begin slowing down by burning sideways, or not 90 degrees, but north. Ooh, that was close. Okay, now let's move ourselves over here beside the command module. Very good. Let's move over just a little bit, not too far. Move back just a hair, that should be good. Okay, highlight our Kerbal, activate the menu. Huh, don't see the photovoltaic panel in the inventory. What's going on with that? Oh boy, okay, let's go back over here. Make sure that we grab it this time. Let's increase our speed so we're not playing around too much more. Start to decrease that speed rapidly. Turn ourselves. Came in a little too hot, but good enough. Let's decrease our altitude. And we'll just make this easy on ourselves by putting ourselves right in front of the pod and grabbing it. Come on, and grab it. Highlight this. Okay, it's still in here, so it's not missing. That's good. Let's put it in our inventory. Go ahead and climb on up. Activate our RCS once we can. And then head on over to our experiment. Say once we hit about 25 meters per second, we'll be about halfway there. We can start to slow down. And slow down a little bit more once we're in the last quarter of the distance. That's not our module. Where's our module? Well, tell me we lost our location. Where'd it go? Alright, if that ever happens and you lose track of where it is, you can just open up your map and then find out where it is. Wait, I think I see it. Nope, I don't. Let's zoom out a little bit then. See if we can locate this thing. Is that us over there? Okay, it is. Alright, let's go over there. Oh, talk about some altitude. Okay, let's reduce that a little bit. Make sure we're not coming in too hot though. And let's try to orient ourselves the way we had it last time. Place this photovoltaic panel right here beside of that control module or station. Let's back up a little bit and then place that. Okay, we backed up too much. There we go. Let's go ahead and place it here. We have just enough RCS to be able to make it back and play around with if we have to. Okay, cool. Now that both of those have been placed, let's swap back to our vessel and get our scientist out here. And grab that mystery goo breaking ground module. Place it in the scientist's inventory. Let's turn that light on. Begin to climb down, and once we automatically let go, turn our SAS on, RCS on, and let's move over to our experiment stations, which we can see a lot better now that we have both of them deployed and a Kerbal over there. And we won't need to break out Jeb to do anything this time. We already planted the flag here. We've already grabbed our rock. You can grab the rock with anyone. You can plant a flag with anyone. I just like to give Jeb something to do on the surface besides piloting the vessel. Once we get over here, we will place this on the other side of our control module. And then we will get our Kerbals back in our vessel so we can make our way back to orbit so we can rendezvous with the other vessel. Rendezvous back up with Valentina on Valentine's Day. Let's highlight all these and make sure they are working properly now. Let's see, 3 units of power being produced, that's good. We have a signal, which is also good. 35% science rate, we are good to go. So let's go on ahead and get these Kerbals back into the vessel so we can make our way back home. And if I'm not mistaken, once we get back to Kerbin after doing all of this, we should no longer have any more contracts or missions to do in the Kerbin system. We should be ready to head towards Duna. And we should have quite a bit of science to unlock all the stuff necessary to make it a nice trip out there and back for our first journey there, which should just be a flyby and return. We might go ahead and make orbit while we're at it, we might not. Depends on what we can build, but we'll find out. But for now, let's try to make our way back home. grab the vessel, move on up and board, and then swap back over to, I believe, Bill. And let's get him back in. We have about 70 seconds worth of thrust left if we are constantly thrusting, maybe less. More than enough to make our way back over here. In fact, we probably have enough to do like 4 more trips, but we're not going to do that. Just taking in the view one last time before we get out of here. Alright, let's get ourselves back onto the vessel. Reduce that speed so we don't smash into it. Tempted to just save and show you what that would look like, but we're not going to do that. We spent enough time here. Alright, open our map and close it again so all this resets down here. Let's quick save. And we are done. Alright, so let's wait until this vessel is close to about here in its orbit. Let's go ahead and make sure to set it as our target though. Actually, we'll wait until the target mark is just a little past us, pointing more towards the 90-degree side of it instead of the 270 side, and once it's right above us, moving towards the 90-degree mark, we will begin our ascent. Oops, slow down. Okay. Let's make sure our vessel's okay. Alright, now let's continue our time warp just a little faster and stop it about there. And we'll activate our SAS. We'll leave our SAS off. We're going to need that maybe. Now let's go on ahead and start our ascent. Let's retract our landing gear and immediately start to point just a little ahead of that vessel's target mark. Lock our SAS and let's burn. Make sure that we are set to orbit mode. Let's try not to burn too hard. We don't want to go too much further beyond 45 to 50,000 on our altitude. Let's push it up until it begins to cross that. Alright, now we'll push it just a little further, maybe to about 55, 60,000. Don't want to go too far and increase our speed too much. And we already have a little bit of a correction burn to do here. We need to make sure that we are ready for it. Let's point ourselves towards normal so we can raise that up. And the closer we can get to that, the better. That way we can make it as accurate as possible. We're not going to have too much time to do that though. Let's see, we are at 11,000 on our altitude, so we should be able to time warp. Let's go ahead and do that manually instead of selecting it on our orbital trajectory. Make sure that that descent node is highlighted so we can keep track of it. And go ahead and finish our time warp out to that descending node. And as soon as we get there, we need to burn very quickly, but controlled, and try to get that as close to 0 as possible. We are almost right on top of it, so let's go ahead and deactivate our warp, begin our burn, try to control it. Oh, that was too much. Okay, so now we're going to have to point anti-normal and take it a little more smoothly this time. And there we go. That might be as close as we can get. Let's reduce our thrusting limiter down as much as possible to try to get that as close as possible. Again, highlight that. And I want to say that 0.2 might be as good as it gets. As soon as it touches the surface, we'll back off. Now let's highlight our interaction nodes, interact 1 and 2, and we will burn radial in and see where that takes us, because we want to push this prograde marker and force it on top of the target marker, and to do that we might have to do radial M, but let's find out. And we see Interact 2 starting to move down, which is good. So is Interact 1, so let's cut our engine and set that back to full throttle. Now let's be very careful how we do this. Make sure to re-highlight those. Make sure to keep on top of the radial mark so we're not messing up our ascent or descent nodes too much. And try to bring those in as close as possible. Looks like we're going to have to try to go with Interact 2. So let's keep an eye on Interact 2 while we move this. Let's increase our speed just a little bit more. We might have to do another inclination correction burn. We might have to also prograde a little bit. Now we're watching Interact 1 until it does not reduce at all, or until it's right on top of our vessel. Once it is, we will hit prograde and try to increase our line again until our line is starting to overlap the other vessels. And we'll see the Interact 2 probably pop up again once they do. Alright, that's actually quite close. Let's continue to burn prograde and see if we can get that just a little closer. Alright, right here we're going to stop and take our thrust limiter back as low as possible so we can make this as tight as possible. Let's re-highlight that Interact node and see just how close we can get that. It's starting to slow down a little bit. Not sure how close we can get it, but we'll find out. Now once it starts to slow down a lot, we'll want to throttle down. It's already slowing down a lot. Looks like 1 kilometer is as good as that's going to get. And our descent node is coming up. Let's hurry up and swap over to normal, so we can correct that while also keeping an eye on that separation. Let's deactivate our ComNet there so we can actually see it. And once we get real close to that, let's also check our engine real fast to make sure that we have a nice... Okay, good. We are very limited on our thrust. Let's re-highlight these and get ready to burn. Try to get that as close to 0 as possible and see if it brings our separation in just a little better. It's not really moving our separation much, but we still need to correct it irregardless. We want to try to get that descending node right on top of that Interact node, if possible. Like right about there. And now, if I'm not mistaken, we can just warp over to our periapse. But before we do that, let's quick save just in case it messes up. We will manually warp it first. Okay, so it didn't change that at all. Let's warp right around here and be ready to pro-burn so we can increase it on the opposite side of our orbit very slowly and try to narrow that separation down just a little bit more. We have tons of delta V, we'll be okay. Alright, now that we are here, we will wait until that realigns. Now, let's quick save again and keep an eye on that separation as we prograde burn. Okay, so 0.9 is about as good as that's going to get, if I'm not mistaken. So let's retro burn and reduce that back down to 0.9 and then cut it off. I don't think radial burning is going to help much here, so we'll just take what we can get. Let's quick save and manually warp ahead just a little bit. It did not affect our separation, which is now 40 minutes away. We're going to be coming in at 1.9 meters per second, so let's just go ahead and warp nice and close, but not too close. And along the way, let's go ahead and switch to docking mode. And then after we get there, it should automatically swap from staging mode to docking mode for us. But let's also go ahead and just swap it to stability assist and prepare to put that on rotation mode in the docking mode, so we can aim at the target. Okay, so it didn't automatically swap. Let's go ahead and make sure to do that. Close our time warp, switch to rotation, and also switch to target mode. And then let's find our target. It should be right outside of us there. Looks like it's already starting to move away, so now we need to be facing retrograde. Let's turn our RCS on and begin to... Okay, let's go back to linear mode on the control mode and docking mode and begin to reduce our speed down to 0 meters per second. And as soon as we hit 0 meters per second, we will cut our RCS off, turn it off, go back to rotation mode, and then point ourselves at our target, and then lock our SAS, like so, as close to on target as possible. And we will turn our RCS back on and go back to linear mode and begin thrusting towards the target. Let's go ahead and correct our prograde mark, slow down, correct it, slow down, correct it. And once you're slowed down to like 0.1 meters per second, and you have corrected it as much as possible, begin to burn towards it again. We'll just increase our speed as we continue to correct that prograde mark to about 2.5 meters per second should be good. Then turn our RCS off and quick save. Let's go to our map view and check out our separation now. Okay, so we're going to be 100 kilometers or less away from our target. We can go ahead and time warp a little bit. And again, much like last time, we might have to correct our prograde mark along the way. We don't want it to get too far off that mark. Once we're about maybe 400, 300 meters away, we'll correct that. Okay, so we'll stop at about 300 meters in distance and stop and turn that off. Let's go to rotate and line ourselves up with the target mark, lock our SAS, go back to linear mode, turn the RCS on. Let's force that prograde mark back over top of the target mark. Once we get it there, let's turn our RCS off. That way it doesn't shift us around. Now that we're locked back onto that position, we can turn it back on. Now let's turn it back off and time warp just a little closer. Once we get about 100 meters away, we're going to have to start slowing down. Now that we're 100 meters away, let's turn it off, disengage our warp mode, turn our RCS back on. Let's correct ourselves while we slow down. We'll bring it down to about... Okay, I think we're getting cracking, so let's save real quick, and then reload the quick save. Once it reloads, we shouldn't be having that problem to where it's just shifting on its own rapidly like that. Sometimes that happens, and that's the best thing you can do to take care of that situation. Just save right where you are, and then reload that save that you just made. And upon reload, we should be just fine. Let's face back towards our target. See, now nothing's moving. That's good. Let's go ahead and swap back to docking mode and start increasing our speed since for some reason we're moving away from the target. And we'll move that prograde back down over the target mark. Let's increase our speed to about 1 meter per second. And once we get about 30 to 20 meters away from the target, much like last time, we will slow ourselves down to 0 and reorient the vessels to be facing each other and controlling from the docking ports with the docking ports set as the target. And we will be there shortly, and we'll also have to make sure we are rotated correctly so our solar panels aren't touching tips and not risking any chance of damaging them. Let's make sure that we keep an eye on that prograde mark, correcting it as we go. And we are now getting close to that 30 meter per second distance mark. So let's go ahead and reduce our speed just a little bit. Let's reduce it down to about 0.5. Let's check our distance. So once we hit about 20 meters in distance, we will cut it off to 0 meter per second relative speed. Go ahead and begin doing that now while correcting our prograde mark and cut RCS off. Now let's target that docking port and control from this docking port. And then hold the left shoulder button, D-pad over, swap to the other vessel, do the same thing, control from here on this docking port, and target that docking port. Activate our SAS, swap to rotation mode, and let's target that other vessel. And again, you'll have to do this a couple times to make sure it's nice and aligned correctly. Once it's over top of target, re-engage your RCS after turning it off. Align this vessel, lock the SAS, align this one a little closer again, lock your SAS, and one more time here. Then we'll rotate our vessels. That one's already closer to being top and bottom, so we'll make this one left and right. Swap to the other one, make sure that it's straight up and down, it's still locked on, good. Let's reorient this one a little bit closer to that target mark. There we go. And then we will swap back to linear mode, activate our RCS, and begin to thrust towards the other vessel. And again, you can highlight your docking port, aim your camera there for a better view as you approach the other vessel, while keeping an eye on your prograde mark over the target mark here. Let's go ahead and increase our speed just a little bit more so we're not doing this all day. Just got to make sure you can slow down once you get close to the docking port. And once you're close enough, say about 5 meters away, you'll want to reduce the speed back down to 0.1. Making sure that the vessel is still locked onto the target. The SAS is locked on. Reduce your speed, correct your prograde, and you can turn the RCS off, turn the SAS off, and let it do its thing once you're close enough. And we are docked. Alright, now to make it back home. Now what we're going to do, this is the engine that's on right now, so let's take the fuel that we have in this and try to dump it into this vessel. We'll start with the smaller tank, because we're going to be using this engine first, and then decoupling it and keeping this command pod docked up to this one, and using this engine for the rest of the return trip. Now let's deactivate that one and activate this one, and continue to dump fuel into this vessel. Once that's complete, we will deactivate all those windows and make sure to put our staging back in the correct order, starting with this engine, and then we need this decoupler, which is the top decoupler on stage 2. Let's move it down here, and that should be fine. To make sure that we're controlling from the appropriate command pod. All those drogue chutes are up here together, that's good. And then all the larger chutes after that, that's good. So let's go on ahead and quick save. And then set our control from this command pod since we're using its engine. And then go to staging mode, activate our SAS, point prograde. Alright. And now we want to be on the inner side of Minmus, between it and Kerbin for our retro burn. So let's go ahead and warp over here just a little before we reach that point, so we can make sure we get it as close as possible to in between Kerbin and Minmus, which should be at about, I want to say, here. It's a little behind, so let's time warp just a little further. Now if I stop it here and we take a look, our vessel is nice and lined up in the middle of Minmus, in between it and Kerbin, which is where we will start our prograde burn, so let's go ahead and activate our engines, make sure they are working properly, and increasing our speed. We need to turn the thrust limiter back up. Okay, it's increasing our speed, that's good. It's the only engine on, that's also good. Let's zoom out and see how this works out for us. We should be leaving the influence of Minmus at just over 250 meters per second or so. Okay, there it goes. Let's highlight our periapsis and our apoapsis and then continue to burn and see just how close to Kerbin that takes us. Very good. And we should be running out of fuel here shortly. Let's make sure to keep that periapse highlighted. How much fuel do we have? 41 meters per second of delta V remaining. Should be cutting off any time now. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, we are out of fuel. Now, this is where we want to carefully quick save and decouple that stage. Very good. Okay, now we need to swap to this command pod and control from it, which will turn our vessel around. Let's make sure our throttle is completely cut off and then activate this engine. And the staging looks like it's not going to do it properly, and at the risk of decoupling this, we are not going to stage. We are just going to manually activate the engine like so, and then return to the map view, and let's set our periapse to stay open. Zoom in a little bit so we can keep a closer eye on it while we move that in towards about 45,000 meters. No lower than 35,000. About, let's see, and we will stop it at about there. Stop it at about 39,000, that'll work. Let's save our game, and then go ahead and warp to where we are just above the atmosphere if we can. Say about, well, let's manually warp ahead one spot so it doesn't affect our periapsis when we do that. And then we will select our spot on the orbital line and warp over there. Make sure that we are set to be prograde and facing prograde for our surface burn. Make sure we are in surface mode. And then we'll just finish our warp as we continue to head back home. Upon arrival, we might have to move fast. Okay, so we're only 380 some thousand meters above the surface of Kerbin. We're good. Let's go ahead and disengage these solar panels so we have less to worry about once we get closer to the atmosphere. And in fact, we can go ahead and close one more. Let's open up our resource menu to make sure we're good. Okay, very good. Alright, now for the fun part. Let's go ahead and quick save just in case anything happens on this re-entry. It may be better to separate the vessels, it may not be, we'll find out. Let's just go on ahead and time warp down to about 90,000 meters above the surface, and we'll begin our retro burn. And like last time, we learned the hard way. We are going to dump this tank no matter how much is left in it once we hit the atmosphere and get close to burning. Okay, let's move a little closer to about 95 and then we will begin our burn. Let's keep an eye on our periapse. We don't want it to drop too low. We want to have a nice angle of descent. We are flying right over top of the Kerbal Space Center, so we would land just a little closer, we would get a little more money back from this, but I think we'll be okay. Now we are starting to dip into the atmosphere here shortly. Let's go on ahead and retract this other solar panel so we don't lose it. Now we are in the atmosphere. We need to be very careful and be ready to decouple this tank once we start to notice that we are beginning to burn. If we can, we need to try to do it a little ahead of time. Say at about 55,000 meters, we're going to go ahead and decouple this unless we start burning a little sooner. Yep, okay, go ahead and decouple. Let's go to docking mode, activate our RCS, and try to move over a little bit so we don't hit that thing. Just in case it happens to come back at us. Let's disengage our RCS, go back to staging mode, and then turn our RCS back on so we can try to keep control as we descend with both these connected, just in case anything happens. We don't want to lose these pods, but we should be okay. They are a little larger than the Mark 1 command pod that we did this with the last couple times. I think we'll be okay though. Let's zoom out so we can get a better view. It's a shame to waste all that fuel in that stage, but it's okay. We made it back. It'll be worth it. It was over-engineered just a little bit. But that's a good thing, just in case anyone that is watching this series might have any problems with not having enough Delta V, or might need to do some correction burns of their own, or if they wanted to do some more biome hopping. There's plenty of Delta V to do all that. And I try to make sure that I do that with every mission. We are starting to approach the point where G-force is really going to increase rapidly and slam these kerbals a little bit. It's going to get a little uncomfortable for them. We might lose control. We might not, but we'll find out. And our speed is increasingly decreasing, if that makes any sense. It's increasing its rapid decrease. And now we are starting to hit the lower atmosphere. Very good. No issues. That's even better. And once those drogues can deploy, we will deploy them. And let's activate our time warp. And once we hit about 2,500 meters, we will disengage our time warp and prepare to activate the other parachutes and prepare to undock these two vessels. And 3, 2. Now let's figure out which docking port we need to highlight, and then go ahead and activate these other parachutes, and then let's do a quick save just in case, and then we will time warp down to about 1,000 meters so these other parachutes can activate. Zoom out so we can get a nice view of that. Oh yeah. There we go. Now let's check our surface speed. Okay, good. So when we undock, they should both still be traveling down to the surface at about that speed. We'll find out. Let's go ahead and undock. Groovy. Okay, now let's disengage our time warp. Let's activate our SAS on this vessel, set it to retro, do the same thing with the other one, and its RCS is already on. We'll use it. Go to docking mode and shift this vessel over a little bit so it doesn't land right on top of the other one. Slowly getting out of the way. We want to make sure to do that very quickly because we are only 600 and some meters away from the surface. Keep on moving. Don't want to land too close. Alrighty, there we go. Let's deactivate the RCS, go back to staging mode. Let's turn these vessels towards the sun so we can get a nice view. Swap over to the other one. Turn it towards the sun as well. Oh, where is the sun? Where's this one facing? Okay, well, let's turn it this way. Awesome. Okay, now let's, while these are landing, let's go ahead and check out our accomplishments here. Flag planted, landed on Minmus, suborbital flight above Minmus, landed on the surface, walked on the surface, planted the flag. Very good. And after we land and recover these two pods, we should have every single one of these completed except for this one. We might have to do what we did last time and extend the episode a little longer to collect that breaking ground science, but we'll worry about that here in a second. Let's focus on landing these. And as soon as this one lands, we need to swap to the other one. Very good. Now that's pretty groovy. Hello. Alright, let's go on ahead and quick save, and then we will go to our tracking station. Alright, actually first let's check these out again. We have explored Minmus and returned from the surface. So let's go on ahead and clear those, go back to our contracts. Alright, so that knocks out the primary contract. So let's go to our tracking station and recover those 2 pods. And then while we're in the tracking station, we'll also check out our communication network to make sure the breaking ground modules on Minmus are actually connected, so we can get that data as well and complete that contract too. And while we're at it, let's go on ahead and terminate some of this debris. Ooh, don't terminate that relay. Okay, there we go. Let's go on ahead and recover that pod. That was the one with all the science. Looks like we gained a decent amount of science from that. We landed fairly close to the KSC, so we recovered a little bit of money from those. And Jebediah is now level 2, and so is Bob. Very good. And then let's get rid of that debris. And we will also get rid of... Actually, it's on its way out of Kerbin, so let's keep it in orbit and find out where it goes. And let's recover Valentina's pod. Got a little bit of science from that one as well. A little bit of cash, and no XP for her. But she's already level 2 anyway, so that's okay. Now, down here we can see that we have got the science data from the space around Minmus, the science data from the surface, and we have brought back a green sandstone, so that should be all of the contracts except for the breaking ground science, which we will now check on. And make sure... Okay, so we have a connection. So let's go on ahead and start time warping a little bit and see if we don't receive some of that science or not. Keeping an eye down here for that to pop up. Oh, we need to refocus on Kerbin. Okay. Alright, we are starting to receive some science. So now let's go ahead and continue time warping until we don't receive any more science, until it's completely finished. So there's 4, 5, watching down here, there's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, not sure how much longer this is going to keep, and let's take a look at what we got. Got 20.909, 22.695, so that times 12 we should have gained about maybe somewhere between 300 to 400 science from all that. Let's close all those out and check this out. I've initiated the first flyby of the sun. I imagine that's because our debris made its way out. Okay, so that's actually moving its way towards Eve, which is pretty cool. And it's actually somewhat in line with Eve. It might have a chance of entering Eve's sphere of influence, so we'll just keep that there. And maybe score a flyby of Eve from our debris. That'd be pretty cool. Now, this breaking ground experiment setup that we have on Minmus, we can get rid of it. We can also get rid of the other one, since we have no use for those any longer. Let's check our contracts. Alright, and that took care of our gather surface deployed mystery goo observation science from the surface of Minmus. So that completes all of our contracts. Let's leave the tracking station and go back to our space center. And let's see what we have now. We have 1,000 science. That's science and preparation for that mission. Let's see what else we might need for that mission. Won't really need any new engines per se, but we'll keep that in mind. we have to upgrade our science facility in order to get those new engines though. We have the money to do it, but let's find out what else we can use before we do that. Don't really need those new tanks, not yet per se. We don't really need any of this either. We're not going to need any of the smaller engines or the smaller fuel tanks either. We're not going to need any of those either. Not really going to need any of that at all. Is there anything we're actually going to need? Well, we could go ahead and prepare for some of the missions ahead of that, which is deploying more breaking ground science, and we're going to need that communitron to be able to make contact back with Kerbin once we deploy those. The Grand Slam passive seismometer, that's good if you're planning to like eject a stage right when you take off so it can slam into the ground next to where you deployed it. But again, we're going to need both those, so let's go ahead and take it. Not really going to need any of these probe cores yet. None of that. None of this. There is a little more science we can get from the atmospheric variometer, but we're not going to get that yet either. Don't need any other rover stuff. Don't need the heat shield or any of the heavy landing gear for space planes, or any of the space plane stuff either. Don't need any of these larger composite parts. Don't need the new docking port just yet. So I guess we'll go on ahead and start unlocking some of these larger fuel tanks maybe. And let's go ahead and get that space lab, the mobile processing lab. We can score a lot of science with that in the coming episodes, so we'll take that. And let's go ahead and unlock this advanced fuel system. We can get just one of these. Let's make sure we get the one that we want to get. Or we could get the nukes, but I never really use those, to be honest. I like doing it the hard way. Not sure we really need any of this stuff, but we could go ahead and unlock the advanced probe cores so we can make some better relays in the future. I'm not really sure what to use this on, to be honest, because there's really nothing much we need. We could save it to put towards getting the very heavy rocketry, which will really come in handy, to be honest, but at the same time we're also going to need those fuel tanks for these, so let's go ahead and unlock those. Alright, and we will make our save now. Actually, no, we're not. We still have a little bit to do. We need to make sure that all of our stuff is upgraded to where we want it to be. We're going to go ahead and upgrade our R&D facility. It's going to take about half of our money. That's okay though, because we have plenty. And our launch pad is fully upgraded. We could go ahead and upgrade our VAB, but that would knock us down to about 1 million. And if our recent vessels are any indicator, well, none of these are very expensive, to be honest. Our most expensive one is 100,000. And I think, honestly, that is capable of a do not flyby and return. So we should be okay on money if we do that. Leaves us 1 million at the most. Flyby and return vessel would cost us about 100,000 to 150,000. I don't foresee us needing more than 255 parts though. However, I would like to upgrade this tracking station so we can get a stronger network going. So let's go on ahead and upgrade that maybe. Now let's wait until we start deploying those relays. So we have our R&D department fully upgraded, and our astronaut complex fully upgraded now, as well as our launch pad. Now that just leaves our VAB, tracking station, and the admin building, as well as the spaceplane hangar and the runway to upgrade. Let's go ahead and upgrade our runway once. It's pretty cheap. Alright, so that's all we'll do. We are edging closer to having all of these fully upgraded. We have plenty of money. We've unlocked some new science. believe we will go ahead and save and call this one quits. I may or may not be right back online after a short break so we can head out for a Duna flyby. I believe I have the time to do it. Let's go ahead and make a quick save as well. And that'll be it for this episode. I will, I guess, go ahead and take a quick break, grab a bite to eat, something to drink, take a few, and return for a Duna flyby episode. So I'll be right back here shortly for that, but until then, thank you for watching as always. I hope this is helping someone. I'm already starting to get some comments all across social media about how it's helping a lot of people learn some new things and helping them progress in the game, and I'm very grateful for that. It's absolutely my pleasure. That's what I'm doing this whole series for. But again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again here shortly for our Duna flyby and return mission. And once again, happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there, and see you all again shortly. Goodbye.